please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, that was from the town of Phillipstown Planning Board. Sorry, wrong board meeting. Just kidding. I know where I am. Good afternoon and welcome to the February 2025 meeting of the MTA Finance Committee meeting. David, are there any public speakers?
Our one registered public speaker is Jason Anthony.
Wow. Jason, you're allocated an extra 2 seconds. Please use it wisely.
Good afternoon, Neil, and good afternoon to the rest of the board. Jason Anthony, the Transit Guru. As I predicted it last month, the federal government did a chainsaw move to our beloved Empire State. But our beloved Governor, Kathy Hochul, came to the rescue. But let's remind to the media that accessibility should be included into the data because people like myself and others use New York City Subway, Long Island Railroad, Metro North, New Jersey Transit Corporation, Amtrak, to move along the Northeast region. As a matter of fact, our area is the heart of the Northeast. If anything happens in our region, it affects the Northeast region. Anything as north as Boston and anything as south as the DMV area. In other words, the district, Maryland, and Virginia. So let's get those facts in. So $16 billion, that's a huge number. But think about it, folks. $16 billion. Kevin, let's save congestion pricing and let's keep those switches on once and for all. Thank you for letting me speak this month again, Neil. And I'll see you guys on Wednesday at Grand Central Madison.
Thank you.
That
That's our only
concludes
public
our
speaker,
yeah.
yes.
Thank you. Okay, great. All right, David. Then the monthly finance performance report, please.
Certainly. Operating results are preliminary and are compared with the adopted budget. This month takeaways, overall January results were $90 million favorable, with about 2/3 due to operating subsidy results. Operating subsidies were $67 million favorable, although 60% of that is timing related. Paid ridership for all agencies, along with B&T traffic, was favorable across the board. Farebox revenue was $11 million favorable, but toll revenue was $1.6 million unfavorable. Operating expense spending was favorable by $9 million, which is 0.5%. Debt service expense was $4 million favorable, and the capital subsidies were $5 million favorable. About 60% of the $67 million operating subsidy favorable was due to timing related receipt of local operating assistance, which we had expected to receive back in December. The results of the payroll mobility tax, the petroleum business tax, and the urban tax primarily comprise the remainder of the favorable operating subsidies results. Paid ridership for all agencies, along with B&T traffic, was favorable, as I mentioned. Subway and bus fare evasion continues to improve. Subway was 14% in the second quarter and declined to 10.4% in the fourth quarter, while bus was 49.4% in the second quarter and declined to 44.9% in the fourth quarter. Subway and bus is measured on a quarterly basis. Fares not collected on the Long Island Railroad was 4.3% in January, down from the fourth quarter average of 8.2%. Fares not collected on Metro North was 3.4% in January, slightly higher than the fourth quarter average of 2.8%. Subway revenue was $7 million favorable, while combined transit and MTA bus farebox revenue for buses was unfavorable by $1 million due to lower average yield per passenger. Long Island Railroad was $3 million favorable, and Metro North was $1 million favorable. Operating expenses were $9 million favorable, Labor was $2 million unfavorable. Outside of timing-related impacts, payroll was favorable by $15 million, while overtime was unfavorable by $20 million, both due to vacancies. Non-labor expenses were $12 million favorable. Paratransit contracts were $11 million unfavorable due to higher trip volume. Electric and fuel costs were a combined $3 million favorable due to lower rates and usage. And variances for the other categories were primarily timing related. Further details are in the financial performance report.
Questions for David on operating revenue and expenses? David, just a quick one. I know 1 month is not a trend, but it's a data point. Long Island Railroad up 7% and Subway up 3%. Are these leading indicators of anything, or I think these are one-time experiences?
Honestly, I don't think there's any reason to believe either one of those are the case, and we need to wait.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. For those who have been waiting for the data and did not read the New York Times this morning, we're very fortunate that our co-CFO, Jay Patel, is going to give us the detail behind also a singular month, but a really powerful month. And hopefully there'll be some thoughtful questions after. Jay, the floor is yours to talk about the revenue from congestion pricing.
Thank you, Chair. So this month, we're presenting the first month of results for congestion relief on the financial results. I'll go over the high level and then go into some details on the revenue and the expenses. High level, for the month of January, our estimated revenue is $48.6 million. That represents 27 days for the month of January. On the expense side, we had $9.1 million of operating expenses. Those expenses included the operations of the camera system, our customer service center, any credit card fees for the month of January, and then we had a mitigation accrual for $2 million for a total expense line of $11.1 million, and then net operating revenue of $37.5 million. On the mitigation accrual, I just want to go into a little bit of detail. If you recall, we had about $155 million set aside for mitigation efforts throughout sort of the first 5 to 6 years. So on our monthly financials, as we're working with the city to finalize MOUs and start spending the money, for our financials, like I said, we accrue the money, so we plan on accruing about $23 to $24 million this year for those mitigation efforts, and then on a cash basis, as we start spending that money, we'll adjust the budget and the actuals. On the revenue side, let me give you a little bit more detail. I know everybody's interested in that. Of the 48.6, about $10.6 million was for the for-hire vehicle and taxi surcharge toll that we've been charging. Those numbers are about 22% of the total revenue. So of the remaining 38 million, those are for all the passenger vehicles, trucks, and such. So let me break down that 38 million a little bit more. Those are actual charges for customer easy passes and tolls by mail. 85% of that $38 million was for passenger vehicles, and the remaining 15% were for trucks, buses, and motorcycles. And I'll go into a little bit more detail of the total 48 on the next slide, but wanted folks to start understanding a little bit of the numbers here. Based on that, the net operating revenue is 37.5. On an annualized basis, we project that we're still on track for the $500 million. Remember, January is it was a short month, also a cold month, and for traffic purposes, we always know on our TBTA facilities that is a slow month, and that as we get into the warmer months, traffic increases. So even if you did the basic math of 37.5 times 12, you're about at 450 million. But again, I just want to remind folks, the spring, the summer, some of the fall are higher traffic months. So we believe we are on track for the $500 million in net revenue based on early January results. As a reminder, we've issued $900 million in debt for the system infrastructure cost and to start initial capital projects. A little more detail on the revenue. So of the 48.6, revenue by vehicle type, 68% is passenger vehicles, 22% taxis and for-hire vehicles, 9% for single and multi-unit trucks, and then 1% are the buses and motorcycle revenue. Sure. Yeah. For revenue by time of day, when we've looked at the revenue, 95% of the tolls total of the 48.6 is for peak tolls collected, and then 5% is off-peak. Reminder, that seems like a big number, but the program itself is to reduce congestion price, right? Congestion. And so peak tolls would be that. And so it's in line with what we've seen in traffic, but also a reminder that the off-peak tolls are discounted by 75%. So that number should be low and is as expected of the number for the 38 million, which that represents the revenue by time of day. So the right hand is really about 38 million because for the for-hire vehicles and taxis, we don't have the data for the time of day for peak and off-peak. But we wanted to make sure that folks understood for the passenger vehicles, trucks, and buses, the breakout is 95% and 5%. Also, I want to clarify one other thing. In our financial performance report, you see that there's a budget number of revenue of 52.1 for revenue, and then 16.6 million for operating expenses. That was a projection that we did in November for the year. So, you know, net, when you look at the operating revenue, it was projected to be 35.5 on a net basis. For January results, again, I'll remind everyone, it was 37.5, so a little bit better than what we had projected. But, you know, this is a new program for us, so we're looking at the data, the expenses, and we'll adjust the budget allocations going forward to see results. But I just want to make sure everyone understood it's a budget we put together in November. It's not precise because we don't have any data. And as we get data, we'll be adjusting the budget. But it seems from all indicators that the program is reducing traffic, but also projecting the revenue to be on target for what we had in pages of studies and what we were looking at in the fall.
Anything else?
Nope.
All right, questions. We'll start with Mira, and then Hada, and then Lisa.
On the breakdown of passenger truck for hire, I know that was percentage by revenue, not by trip, but how does it compare with what you anticipated in terms of what the
Sure.
The trucks seemed low. That was my
The
question.
trucks
One of
seem
my
very
questions.
low,
That's exactly
yeah,
what my
and maybe
question
you'll tell us,
Right.
yeah.
So I think for taxis and for-hire vehicles, we had looked at September, October data, and based on that, it pretty much is right on target to that number. And then passenger vehicles versus trucks, which is, I think, the biggest split that everybody's concerned about, it is what we're seeing. When we look at your chargeable trips into the zone, we're seeing a high volume of passenger vehicles coming into the zone. And so that is the percentage of revenue that we anticipated about toll revenues.
And as far as trucks go, is it lower than you anticipated for trucks?
I'll have to get back to you on the details, but I think I would say 9% to 10% was what we were anticipating on those Class 2 and Class 3, which is the single and multi-unit vehicles. It looks to be on target for what we were thinking about back in using fall numbers.
And I think it's important to understand because there is concern about where trucks are going. So to the extent we can see that it is, as expected in the environmental review, then I think it's helpful.
Can we just get under what you're asking? Is it because you're wondering, are trucks not intentionally not coming to New York, or are they going to places north of 60th Street and therefore causing undue harm?
Yeah, I think that was one of the concerns that was, part of the environmental review. So I'm curious to see if what we're seeing mirrors what we thought would happen.
From the data that I've been looking at, it looks like we're on budget to what we were projecting. So the number, though it seems low, that's what we were anticipating based on truck traffic pre-congestion pricing.
We may also want to ask Juliet, because maybe there's some data that the finance side does not have that actually had some
trips,
the pre-existing trip levels. Hada.
Thank you. So that was I had two questions. The truck question that Mira asked, and then the mitigation accrual, maybe you mentioned that, the 2 million, can you just explain that? what
Sure.
that is?
So the total mitigation budget is $155 million. We anticipate spending that over 5 to 6 years. We are working with the city to get those MOUs done. And so once those are in place and we start spending, we'll sort of undo the accruals and start using the actual invoices for the purposes of accounting. But it's really just an accounting accrual to make sure that we have money reserved for the mitigation efforts that we are supposed to fund as part of this.
Thank you.
Lisa? And then Midori.
Two related questions. One is, what's the percentage of monies collected by pay by mail? And are you still addressing the fraud licenses that's costing us money?
So one thing that we are looking at and we're seeing is the Easy Pass versus tolls by mail rate is following a similar pattern to what our TBTA facilities are. Remember, the first 60 days of the program are penalty free, and we also just sent out our tolls by mail invoices to our customers, and so we need a little bit more time to make sure that payment rate is similar to our TBTA facilities. But that ratio right now is very similar to other facilities, so we see a high percentage of Easy Pass usage and a smaller percentage of tolls by mail, so we would expect a payment rate very similar to what we have on our facility. 95% payment rate for our TBTA facilities.
And the licenses?
And so we can talk to that with Kathy at B&T, but we are continuing our task force initiatives with NYPD to make sure that any ghost plates or any obstructed vehicle license plates are confiscated, and also working with the NYPD and then our own MTA, PD, and B&T facilities to make sure that happens. I think Kathy has upped her toll evasion initiatives, but we are working with them very closely to make sure in the zone we continue to capture those.
Midori. Oh, and then Mark, please, after.
Thank you. If we could bring up the slide with the revenue for January, that'd be great. So first, I want to say, the fact that we're so close to being kind of on target or pretty much on target with the numbers, I think speaks to the amount of study and investment and time and due diligence has been taken by the MTA. The financial forecasting is it's right on the mark, right? And that's based on, and I want to commend the seriousness by which all MTA employees and staff have worked to develop these numbers. And we are seeing kind of what is happening in slightly lagged, but, in real time almost. So I appreciate that and the turnover of all of this data. Second, I really want to be super clear, and maybe it's more for the public than for us, but this is talking about net operating revenue. Can you just highlight, because there are real operating expenses that it takes to run this mega infrastructure system around all of these streets. Can you highlight a little bit about, what the operating costs are? Because I don't want anyone to say, oh, this means, we're doing more than what we anticipated. No, we had always needed to pay back the operating expenses in this mitigation fund. And so now it kind of just puts us on target. So if you could explain a little bit about the operating costs, that'd be great.
So I just want to make sure there's two different questions I think that you asked there. One on the operating expenses. So the operating cost that we've captured here of 9.1 million, I'll say 7 million of that is the simple operation of the cameras to make sure the cameras are taking the photos, the images are reviewed, and we process all the tolls. There's also customer service, so anything that, the calls that we get to our Easy Pass system, those costs are part of that 9.1 million. Small staff costs, right? We have a team in-house that we know that works on congestion pricing program, and so there's about $300,000 to $400,000 of expenses for the in-house team that runs congestion pricing. And then there's also almost $1 million worth of cost for credit card fees in that $9 million. Now, again, those are operating costs. The second piece I think that you were talking about is really about debt service, and debt service comes out from, your payment of your net surplus. So that goes by legislation into a special lockbox. The net $37.5 million will be transferred to the lockbox, and from the lockbox, I'm sorry about the distraction, we'll be paying any debt service costs for the issuance of the $900 million and any additional debt service we start issuing for funding the capital projects as we continue to commit and spend against those capital projects that are programmed in the 20 to 24 program.
Great, and thank you for plain languaging my questions. That's helpful for the public too, so appreciate that.
Okay, Mark, then Andrew.
Yes, I just want to go back to the trucks for a moment. The shift and the numbers that are there, are we seeing an avoidance of the truck traffic? Because I know one of the concerns, one of the major complaints we have local deliveries. Has there been a shift that we see in the data so far of going to the non-peak hours with that traffic? And are they being successful in making that shift with the working hours? Have we have any data that shows any reflection of how that's working?
So, Mark, I think we'll have to get back to you because I don't want to give you the wrong information or the public the wrong information. I have not specifically looked at that data of shifting. I know the percentages that are peak versus off-peak, but I haven't seen the shift data. So let me get back to you next month on that.
Okay, Andrew.
Jay, thanks for this level of detail that you're giving today. I'm wondering if you've yet had a chance to put a value on the additional ridership on the subways, buses, and commuter rails that have taken place as a result of congestion pricing, and if you've been able to put any kind of dollar figure on it.
So I think you heard David talk about our ridership numbers and revenue numbers for the month are higher than our projected. There's multiple factors to ridership. As you know, every year we've seen an increase in ridership on the subways, buses, as well as on the railroads. A couple different factors are contributing to that. Just the natural increase in the 2024 shift that we saw towards the end of the year, but also on our fare evasion initiatives, specifically on the buses and subways. We've seen in the second half of the year of 2024, a change in fare evasion rates. I think it's a 26% decrease in the fare evasion rate for subways, and then a 13% decrease in the bus fare evasion rates. And so that is contributing to our paid ridership. But also, if you recall, 90% of people are taking already subways and buses and the railroads to commute into the system. So the shift that we would have seen is a very small shift of drivers that would have shifted to our ridership, paid ridership portion. So it is a very small piece, and our system is able to pick it up. It's hard to isolate it specifically for people who were driving, taking public transit, because there are so many different factors in ridership. A change in weather, companies could be asking for more of their employees to come into work more than 2 days from work from home that they were doing. So any given day, the ridership fluctuates. And so to talk about 10% or 100,000 riders on the system is hard to quantify specifically, I think, to congestion pricing.
Yeah, please, Lisa.
One last kind of silly question, but it's been bothering me. Social media has these suggestions about bypassing cameras. How accurate is that information?
She wants to know.
So I can take, I'm kidding.
The top level of the top level of the 59th Street Bridge as opposed to the lower level of the 59th Street.
So if you're referring to plate coverings or no?
Routes.
What, the garage you can go through, that's,
The top level of the 59th Street Bridge as opposed to the bottom level. Or whatever we call it.
So I think our signage has become better on some of those locations where if you were going to take the upper level or the lower level, which one charges the toll or not. I think we've corrected that, and the signage is much better. But remember that, the definition of congestion pricing in the zone is in statute to us. It's below 60th Street. There was one piece about like a building and the garage and the drop-off point. We've fixed that because of the actual street and how you get, I think it was like the first Uber trip or that got charged $1.50 even though they didn't cross the zone. So we've fixed some of that border stuff that we've seen in our polygon that we had created, but most of it is accurate. And I think, like I said, the zone is defined to us, so we've been implementing it based on that. But if there is an issue with the polygon and how it's applied, we are correcting that in real time with Uber, Lyft, and the TSPs. But for the most part, I think when you enter and exit a bridge, it's pretty defined to us.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm going to Norman, anything? Okay, I'm just going to make a couple of remarks. I don't think we can let this moment, I certainly can't let this moment go of the Trump administration attacking what is a brilliant and necessary new revenue stream for the MTA, for the region. And Jay, thank you for that very clear articulation of the success after only a few weeks of what we need. I do think it's worth commenting about it, and I'm going to take a moment to just do that. Broadway is apparently having a lot of success. The governor, in her presentation to the president, I think cited 17% increase in Broadway thanks to the improved congestion in the region. Storytelling on Broadway is usually a good framework to use, and I think that's a good venue for just sharing some comments. If you write a show or a movie or TV, there's really only three kinds of characters. There are victims, there are villains, and there are heroes. And that's it. If you ask a screenwriter, they'll tell you that's it. There's no one else. Everyone else is a bystander. Well, there's a couple of victims in this situation of the president is doing to us. And those are New Yorkers, because congestion pricing is funding our MTA. It is will be the plurality of our next capital plan. It is the way we are able to fund, for the first time ever, the amount of money we have to spend, around 1% a year, to improve what we have, to repair what we have. It is fundamental. New Yorkers, every New Yorker is a victim of this situation. And I'd say the second victim, frankly, is Americans in general. I've shared this stat with some people before. If New York City and its environs were its own country, we would be the 8th largest GDP in the world. As goes New York, so goes America. It's like the way they used to say about General Motors. There is no question that New York is the economic engine of this nation and arguably of the planet. And yet we are having someone muck with the economic engine of the city and the region. Those are the victims. The villains, I'd say there are three. I won't even talk about President Trump because his deplorable nature, I think, is omnipresent in this. But I will say the federal government is hurting New York. The federal government has hurt New York for a very long time. We send $44 billion to Washington. For every dollar we send, we get 80 cents back. That's $2,200 a New Yorker that we send that we don't get back. If you have the benefit of being Mitch McConnell's state of Kentucky, you get $14,000 plus. We give $2,200. The second villain, frankly, are a couple of our congressional representatives. I think I'll just call out two who have been specific in talking about the evils of congestion pricing. Malliotakis and Lawler have been fighting against this, and they should be in Washington trying to reverse that $44 billion. New Yorkers have an incredible tax burden. Why? Because we send so much money to Washington. If we actually got our fair share, our tax rate would be half. And thirdly, and I hate to say this, but the third villain in this for me is Governor Phil Murphy. The governor is praising President Trump. He is playing politics. He is harming his own people that depend on not New Jersey, but New York for their jobs, including his when he worked at Goldman Sachs. So I don't understand why he is praising the president and stopping the progress here in New York. And then there are 4 heroes. I'd say the first hero is our governor, Governor Kathy Hochul. And for those of us who sat in the break room here watching her on New York One, she was vocal, she was clear, she was powerful. She rebutted the completely inappropriate piercing of New York State by the federal government. And I'm thrilled that we are all appointed by her and that she is defending New York in the right way. I'll say a second one, which may be surprising. I want to say a hero that is Andrew Cuomo, who originally, when he was governor, pushed this through. Yes, Mike Bloomberg originated, but Andrew Cuomo made this happen. He may have been opposed to it later on, but he was for it from the beginning, and we are actually only implementing that heroic action. The third, of course, I'll say is our advocacy community, whether it's the Partnership for New York City or Reinvent Albany or many others, even Jason Anthony, who has been here advocating for it. So I want to thank them. And the last hero, well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to look to ourselves. All but one of our board members voted for this multiple times, over and over again. Here we are fighting yet again to defend the damn thing that we keep voting over and over and over for. I think we voted 3 different times for it. And it took courage. And it took courage not just from us individually, but some of us represent elected officials that didn't really want to do this or wasn't in their interest, and they let us do it. So all but one of us supported that. And look, if it's brown nosing, which I was accused of the other day of our chair, who also votes, I will happily be a brown noser because Jano and this board stood forward. So there are victims, there are villains, and there are heroes. But ladies and gentlemen, we're on the winning side of this. And Jay, thank you for your presentation, because generating the money to fund this system is the heroic action. So thank you, and I'm sorry for droning on. Thank you. Thanks. And now to the slightly more scintillating topic of financing. Olga, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Chair. This month's capital financing report includes details of 2 transactions we closed since our last meeting and 1 upcoming transaction. Please let me know if there are any questions on the results of the closed transactions. The new transaction, which we expect to bring to the market later this month, is an issuance of approximately $800 million of either notes or bonds to finance transit and commuter projects in the 2020 to 2024 capital program. Subject to market conditions, we might be also bringing a refunding transaction to the market later this month.
Okay. Any questions for Olga? Okay, hearing none. I'd like to come back to the minutes. I need a motion to approve the January 2025 minutes. Thank you, Mark. Second. Thank you, Hada. Any comments, corrections, deletions? Hearing none. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed. Abstention. Motion passes. Okay, Kevin, could you please introduce the first action item on the TBTA multiple credit supplemental resolution?
Sure. Thank you, Neil. As Jay mentioned, we have already gone into the market and borrowed $900 million related to congestion pricing.
Burn the ships. I love it.
The first $400 million to pay for the infrastructure costs for all the cameras, and another $500 million to get projects going. All that's been in short-term note financing, with the idea that it'll eventually be bonded out. We talked about a year of aging the receipts and then issuing long-term bonds. This action here broadens our, I'll call it our toolkit for being able to continue to borrow in the short term for congestion pricing. So what's in front of you is a resolution to amend what was passed in December, which the board approved $7 billion in borrowing for our entire capital program, including projects related to congestion pricing. But that was for bonds and notes. And we're looking specifically at doing different bank loans. It would be another source of capital that could be secured by congestion pricing revenue. So what this resolution authorizes is us to still stick within that $7 billion authorization, but to if it's attractively priced and we can raise more funds earlier for the congestion pricing projects, allows the staff to negotiate specific bank loans that again would be refinanced with those congestion pricing bonds in the longer term. So it's an amendment, an authorization to amend the TBTA multiple credit and series supplemental resolution to authorize the use of term loan agreements to finance transit and commuter projects secured by certain authorized revenues.
So effectively, the ability to move fast.
Correct.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, we've been continuing to move, and this is just, continuing to make
great.
progress. As Jay pointed out, we're right on target on the revenue collection. We want to have all the borrowing pieces in place so we can keep borrowing to actually finance the projects that are
Perfect, it's
funded.
great. All right, I have a motion, please. All right, thank you, Lisa. Second. Thank you, Mira, and Hayden the third. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye, opposed, abstention, motion passes. Thank you very much. Olga?
We talk a lot about bonds at this committee.
Yes, we do.
But
We have a lot of them.
federal grants is also a very important funding source for our capital programs. And today we're requesting the board's authorization for the chairman and his designees to file for and accept federal grants for federal fiscal year 2025, as well as future federal fiscal years as allowed under federal regulations. The chairman and his designees will also be authorized to file with the federal authorities grant-related certifications and assurances. Rather than seeking a renewed authorization every year, as was done in the past, this authorization is a standing authorization and is necessary to maintain without any breaks the ongoing work of securing and managing federal assistance. The materials included in today's financing report also include information about a recently held public hearing with respect to the projects that could be submitted for federal funding. We will continue to provide to this committee and the board summaries of our annual public hearings, as well as public hearing materials for capital projects that are considered for federal assistance annually, as we've done in the past.
Okay, can I have a motion, please, and to support that? Thank you, Mark. Second. Thank you, Mira. Any questions on us designating Joan or others to request federal or accept federal funds, which of course we'd like some and more and more and more. Okay, no questions. Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Oppose. Abstention. Motion passes. Very good. David, operating surplus, please.
The next item seeks board approval of resolutions which will first certify and transfer $1,423,408,128 of TBTA operating surplus to MTA and the New York City Transit Authority pursuant to Section 1219A2B of the Public Authorities Law. Second, transfer $11,249,639 representing 2024 investment income to the MTA pursuant to Section 569C of the Public Authorities Law. And third, advance the 2025 TBTA surplus as per the attached resolution to the staff summary. And MTA Controller Jim McGovern is available if there are any questions.
Okay. We need a vote on that? Yeah, I guess so.
Yes, you do.
All right, great. Can I have a motion then, please? We're voting on approval of resolutions so we can actually take the surplus.
So,
Yeah, why did we need, okay.
so let me help. So every year, B&T, right, collects the toll revenues and then net of operating expenses, they have a surplus.
Right.
And we transfer that surplus to New York City Transit, MTA. And so this is $1.4 billion that we'd be transferring from TBTA to MTA to help us fund the subsidies that we budgeted for the B&T surplus.
We're moving monies within the organization, but they're
right.
separate
And it's
legal
part of-
entities. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is just an annual, the state law already requires roughly 50% of the net operating surplus, except for 24 million, but 50% gets split between New York City Transit and the commuter railroad. And so as David mentioned, what we do during the year is actually 90% of that surplus is transferred on a monthly basis. Then we audit, do the final calculations, and the balance is of the full 100% of the surplus is transferred. This is all baked into the financial plan, just to be clear. This is not like $1.4 billion of found money. We planned on this. This is the normal flow of operating dollars, but we bring the board action just to, just to authorize that transfer.
All right, clear? Oh, well, let's take a motion in a second, then we can take any questions.
So
Oh,
I make the motion.
okay, thank you. Second. Thank you, Mark. All right, questions, comments, please. Midori.
So this is a proud tradition at the MTA. The fact that TBTA, toll bridges, road revenue goes to reinvesting in the transit system. That's exactly what we're doing with congestion pricing. But federal aid highways doesn't allow for that. These are, facilities that we've obviously built and had for a long time, and so this is a proud tradition as part of, I think, like the 1968 merge of the MTA. And so always really happy to look at subsidizing transit from like a holistic perspective, right? All of our transportation assets really helping the majority of the riders of the MTA. So this is great. We do this annually. I'm all for it. Thanks.
Okay, all right, let's, so we have a motion and a second to move some monies around. All in favor, say aye. Aye, opposed, abstention, motion passes. Okay, the next one's a bit of a weird one, and I feel like it happens annually, and yet I always have to be reminded that we do this annually. So we are now going to approve the mission statement of the MTA, which I think is kind of fun. What if we don't? Right, exactly, we stop. We'll stop. We'll make it into a restaurant.
Why is this in finance? Anyway.
This is a great question. Who would like to answer that question?
I don't know.
Jay,
Is that Jay?
legal counsel.
Yeah, I was going to pay.
Jay can do it. Okay,
I can handle it.
Thank you, Paige.
excellent.
So normally this would go to governance, and
Right,
that would
I
have
was-
been in January. And since we
Got it.
didn't have a
Okay.
governance meeting in
Capiche.
January, we had audit meeting, and governance will go in March. We thought it was appropriate to bring to finance this month, as there's a deadline for submitting our mission statement per regulations for the
okay.
end of February. So we needed to bring it, and finance seems like the most appropriate of all committees that we're holding this month.
Well, we are now a warm body, but we are effective body, and we are here to make our mark. Or as Carl Weisbrod, a former board member, used to say, that we're worse than a rubber stamp because at least a rubber stamp leaves an impression. But in this case, we will leave an impression. You haven't heard? This is a hilarious
All
line.
the time you used to say that.
David, would you like to read the mission statement on page 118? It may not be bad to read into the record what it is, in fact, we do.
I actually don't have a copy of it.
Okay.
with me.
That is, well, I have it in front of, oh, you have it. What, let her see, you don't want to read it? Okay, well, I will just read it. I will just read it then, because it's only one sentence. Okay, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, MTA, preserves and enhances the quality of life and economic health of the region it serves through the cost-efficient provision of safe, on-time, reliable, and clean transportation services. Who could be opposed to that mission? So can I have a motion to approve that mission? Thank you, Lisa. Second, Mira. Any discussion? We're not taking any edits. Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye, opposed, abstention, motion passes. Lizette, the floor is yours.
Thank you. There's one MTA headquarters item this month for Finance Committee approval in the estimated amount of $9.5 million. This action can be found in the February 2025 Finance Committee book. Now, requested by the Division of Safety, Office of Occupational Health Services, this item is a competitively negotiated miscellaneous service contract to be awarded to Quest Diagnostics Clinical Laboratories, Inc., the incumbent, to provide drug and alcohol testing services in support of the MTA's pre- and post-hire workplace drug and alcohol testing policies for all MTA agencies. The contract is for 5 years for a total not to exceed amount of $9.5 million. This award is necessary to ensure MTA's compliance with federally mandated workplace drug, alcohol, and testing requirements. The current contract is predominantly for lab-based analysis of urine specimens, and the new contract adds new lab-based oral fluid testing as an alternative sampling option for approximately 50% of all DOT and non-DOT drug testing performed annually across all MTA agencies. Paper-based documentation of each testing event will be replaced with a fully electronic process, as well as automated scheduling of donors at lab-affiliated collection sites across the New York City metropolitan region. Of the proposals received, 3 were shortlisted and evaluated by the selection committee in accordance with the selection criteria. The selection committee unanimously ranked Quest as technically superior and offering the best value to the MTA. Pricing was determined to be fair and reasonable.
Okay. Thank you very much. In terms of the Quest contract, may I have a motion? Thank you, Hada. Second. Thank you, Lisa. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes. David, first information item, please.
The MTA statute requires that certain mass transportation operating assistance payments be made by the MTA to Dutchess, Orange, and Rockland counties each year from the MTA's MR2 receipts. That's the DORF account. I want to just note that we're talking about MRT2 receipts because that's where the money is coming from, but it's going to cover the collections for both MRT1 and MRT2. Under the statute, Dutchess and Orange counties are each to receive no less than $1.5 million annually, and Rockland County is to receive no less than $2 million annually. The counties receive these amounts in quarterly installments during 2024. The statute also provides for an escalator payment based on the percentage by which MRT1 and MRT2 receipts attributable to each county exceeds the receipts received in 1989 from each county. Pursuant to Section 1270-A4C of the Public Authorities Law, the percentage change calculations are adjusted to reflect tax rates in 1989. Based on the statutorily established formula, which is included in the staff summary, the escalator payments total $7,051,265.10 and are distributed as follows. Dutchess County receiving $1.32 million, Orange County receiving $2.5 million, and Rockland County receiving $2.23 million. Combined with the base amounts, the total amount returned to the counties from the 2024 mortgage recording tax receipts totals $12,051,265.10, distributed as follows. Dutchess County receiving $2.8 million, Orange County receiving $4.0 million, Rockland County receiving $5.2 million. MTA Treasurer Scott Gerstner is available if there are any questions.
Okay. Any questions on the payments to 3 counties, not Putnam?
Can I
Please.
just ask a question? So these, they're set in statute, so the payments haven't moved? They're based on something that was done 36 years ago?
This is actually an information item. The payments are automatically moved. So when you record a mortgage, the mortgage holder pays the county. Those monies go up to the state,
Right.
and then it comes back to the MTA. And this statute requires the MTA to make a partial return to those 3 counties of amounts.
So since 1989, the mortgage recording tax goes
That's
this way to
correct.
these counties?
Each year, yes.
A portion, but the percentage of apportions haven't changed?
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions for David? Okay, thank you, David. Olga, let's have the summary on debt for 2024, please.
So we have a short presentation for you and would like to take a few minutes of your time to recap finances team's accomplishments during last year and to talk about what's ahead of us this year. As we all know, bonds is an important funding source for the MTA's capital program, and cost-effective execution of our financings is critical for prudent management of our financial resources. 2024 was a very busy year for us, you already probably know this from the monthly reports we are providing to this committee. One of our major accomplishments last year was reintroduction to the market of transportation revenue bonds. We haven't been to the market with a fixed rate bond issuance under this credit since 2021. Instead, we were mostly relying on the higher rated payroll mobility tax bonds for our financing needs. However, we wanted to preserve payroll mobility tax bond capacity for financing new projects and decided to bring transportation revenue bonds back to the market for refunding purposes. We did this in March of last year on the heels of a recent upgrade by Fitch and earlier upgrades by Moody's and S&P. And this proved to be a very successful approach, and we also executed a second transportation revenue bond refunding transaction in the fall of last year. In aggregate, these two transactions delivered over $96 million of debt service savings to the budget over the financial plan years. In addition to introducing transportation revenue bonds, we successfully launched a new capital lockbox credit, real estate transfer tax bonds. The finance team worked very hard to make sure that the bonds are structured to get strong ratings, which was not easy given the more volatile nature of the revenue stream and somewhat limited history of the real estate transfer tax receipts. However, the new bonds that the team has put together received strong ratings in a high single A and double A categories, and the bond sale in early January of this year was very well received by investors. Overall, over the course of last year, our financing team issued $3.8 billion of bonds to finance capital projects and to refinance interim financings, and refinanced for savings $3.6 billion of outstanding bonds, delivering $163 million of debt service savings over the financial plan years. All of these savings are now baked in and reflected in the November financial plan. Before we talk about our debt issuance plans for this year, I wanted to take a moment to recap market conditions last year and to talk a little bit about the expectations for this year. Last year, despite the Federal Reserve cutting its target rate by 100 basis points or 1 percentage point, both Treasury and municipal market benchmark rates ended up being higher than they were at the start of the year. This was largely due to the stronger than expected economy and persistent inflation. However, overall, the market was performing well, and last year was a record year for municipal issuance, with nearly $508 billion of municipal bonds sold in the market. Looking ahead to this year, the market expects another 2 rate cuts. However, there is a lot of political uncertainty and fears of persistent inflation, which make it particularly challenging to anticipate interest rate environment for this year. This year, consistent with the November financial plan assumptions, we expect to issue over $6.5 billion of bonds and notes to finance capital projects. The bulk of this debt is assumed to be debt that is either secured by the receipts that go into the capital lockbox fund, such as the real estate transfer tax bonds, or short-term debt that is ultimately expected to be refinanced by the capital lockbox bonds or amounts in the capital lockbox. In addition, we expect to have to remarket approximately $796 million of bonds due to the letter of credit expirations or to deal with mandatory put dates. And finally, there is nearly $2 billion of bonds that, depending on market conditions, we would consider refinancing for savings. Currently, our outstanding debt totals 45.2 billion. Since the end of last year, it increased by 1 billion, or a modest 2.2%. This is because while we issued 2.7 billion of new debt, new money debt last year, we also paid off 1.2 billion of debt at maturity, and also reduced bond par outstanding through refundings. I hope this was succinct enough. This concludes my presentation for today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
CFO, co-CFO?
Yeah, thanks, Olga. That was terrific. I think just a few takeaways. Olga started talking about, we brought the TRB credit to market with upgraded. That's the credit that was most impacted by COVID, because it's really secured by, our operating revenues and operating subsidies. So when COVID hit, the market got really skittish on our transportation revenue bonds, and we had to rely on our tax-backed bonds. So this is kind of showing them the market a vote of confidence that the MTA is back. We've had good ridership recovery, and really a vote of confidence on the financial plan of the MTA. So that was great. We also, as Olga mentioned, we launched some new credits from the lockbox, particularly the real estate transfer tax, and this is really the execution of really getting all the funding out of the new revenue streams that came out of the 20 to 24 plan. And the next step is getting the funding out of the congestion pricing revenues. And we paid off quite a bit of debt this year, which is good. Not everybody, like the federal government, doesn't pay off any debt. So we, even though we issued a bunch, we also paid some off that was issued for prior capital programs. So successful year. And the third thing is that interest rates, we thought they were going to go down. They actually didn't go down. So our borrowing costs get impacted by that. And stay tuned for whatever the federal tax package is going to be, because there's been discussion of eliminating tax exemption for public sector infrastructure projects, which would be a killer to our ability to raise capital. But Olga, great work by the team in 2024, and based on the calendar, it sounds like it'd be pretty busy in 2025.
Yeah, and thank you, Olga, especially with a uprating from Fitch and others. That's a testament to the quality of the work you're doing, so thank you. Any questions for Olga? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to just change order, if you don't mind. David Florio, we may have a couple board members leave, so I want to get your vote in on your master lease first, and then we'll come back to the couple of information items that remain, if you don't mind.
Not at all, Mr. Chairman. We have one transactional action item for consideration and approval.
Great.
And it's for MTA New York City Transit. It's a master lease with TK Metro, Grand Central, and Times Square LLC for retail spaces at the 42nd Street Times Square mezzanine and the 42nd Street Grand Shuttle mezzanine.
Great. Any questions on that? Not that there's much explication, but it's great news. Congratulations. I saw a drawing of it, what they're going to bring to that station, and right near the Roy Lichtenstein, they're going to be putting some new facilities. It looks awesome. So congratulations on bringing that. Okay, so motion. Thank you, Hayda. Second, Lisa. Any questions on that real estate item? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, abstention, motion passes. Thank you, board members who need to leave. Dave, if you want to finish with your information items, then we'll come back to Lizette for her information items.
There are 5 information items, Mr. Chairman. The first 2 items are for New York City Transit and include an access agreement with Queens Ballpark Company for the use of a parking lot at Citi Field in connection with our 120th Street Roosevelt substation project in Queens. And it's also a license agreement with the City of New York Department of Housing Preservation and Development for the temporary use of a parking lot adjacent to the Kingsbridge Bus Depot in Manhattan. The third information item is an easement agreement that was granted to the MTA Long Island Railroad by New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation to construct, operate, and maintain the new station in Elmont. The fourth item is a license between MTA and Starbucks for retail unit and 2 Broadway. This is to allow them to stay in place while they construct the new facility on the other side of our entrance. And the final item is a report on retail agreements entered into directly by the real estate department pursuant to board policy.
Okay, any questions on those information items for real estate? Hearing none, thank you. Lizette, over to you for the remaining information items.
There are 2 information items for Metro North. The first item is a request that the board approve the use of a competitive RFP process pursuant to New York State Public Authorities Law to solicit and evaluate proposals from rail car manufacturers for the procurement of coach cars that will operate on the new Penn Station access route. The second item is a request for board approval to exercise an option of the contract with Siemens Mobility, Inc. for the purchase of 13 dual-mode locomotives and related equipment, with an option to purchase 2 additional locomotives. There are 2 information items for New York City Transit. The first, on behalf of New York City Transit, Long Island Railroad, Metro North Railroad. The first item is a request that the board approve the award of a 5-year estimated quantity contract to Kawasaki Railcar, Inc. for sole source replacement parts that support the agency's operations and maintenance of their respective fleets of rolling stock. The second item is a request that the board approve the exercise of a 2-year option for personal services contracts awarded to PTM Management Corp., New York Paratransit Group, and AMR All Transit LLC to continue providing access-a-ride primary carrier transportation service for paratransit. There are no information items for Long Island Railroad. There are no information items for B&T this month.
All right, thank you very much. I should note that the 2025 February financial plan, unchanged from November, is in the books. We did incorporate some minor notes for those of you who want to check through. I'm guessing that's not going to be a hot ticket right now. We also have, I should mention that there's something else, which I'm forgetting. The monthly consolidated reports are in the committee book. Blanca, I hope you read it. As the only one remaining from the board, I guess I shouldn't have released anyone after the vote. Is there any new business for this committee? Hearing none, may I have a motion to adjourn?
You can't adjourn.
I can't adjourn. We must stay here. So locked in purgatory. Thank you very much. Have a good day.